Welcome back to Energetically You, where we talk all things optimal wellness, abundant mindset, and empowered decision making. I'm your host, Megan Swan, a wellness coach and consultant, and the founder of the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. I help high-performance women thread more wellness into their lifestyle so that it becomes a way of life and not another check mark on their to-do list. I design custom approachable wellness lifestyles because, quite frankly, there is no one-size-fits-all wellness. After working with me, women have more sustainable energy, confidence from within, and ultimately make more aligned and empowered decisions. I am on a mission to empower more women through optimal wellness. Today on the podcast, I am thrilled to interview Eliza Wong. She is the founder of Always On Purpose. She is an executive leadership coach, author, speaker, and facilitator working with organizations such as Airbnb, Salesforce, Roku, LinkedIn, Facebook, and more. Amy offers transformative leadership development and cutting-edge communication strategies to executives and corporate teams around the world, as well as institutions including Stanford University and the University of California at Berkeley. She pulls from various disciplines, studies, and practices to find a conciliant approach to achieve flow and create profound impact through the three lenses of self, relationships, and results. Conversational Intelligence certified executive coach with expertise in transpersonal psychology, design thinking, and interpersonal neurobiology, Amy has catalyzed transformative growth for hundreds of executives and teams. She has a passion for helping leaders identify blind spots, reclaim precious time, energy, and creative bandwidth, and create next level impact. Her new book, Living on Purpose, was released in May of this year. So let's dive in. Welcome, Amy. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Megan.
Well, I want to just dive right in. I absolutely love the analogy or the way that you use a tree to represent your philosophy. So could you kind of like walk us through that analogy and explain the tree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it might help providing a bit of the backstory. So I've been coaching for over 10 years and over those 10 years, I've been really dedicated to following my inspiration and my passion. And it's interesting where it's really guided me. And maybe about 6-7 years, no, more than that, at some point during the 10 years, but early on, I was just so fascinated with communication, all aspects of communication. And I think really where that stemmed from was, I had studied math at UC Berkeley for my undergrad, and I was doing a lot of teaching and a lot of facilitating. And I was so enthralled and just so excited about how it was that people were able to perceive the subject at hand. And more importantly, identify what it was that they didn't know that they didn't know. And I started to recognize as my journey continued to progress that, it's not so much the topic, it's really our ways in how we communicate that makes things possible or not. And so I really became very, very passionate about all things communication. I got certified in conversational intelligence, understanding the neuroscience of communication, neuroscience of trust. And that's when all of a sudden everything started to click for me, where all these deeper transpersonal principles and transpersonal psychology, which my master's is in, like, oh my gosh, like all of this stuff that I've been fascinated with and all the things that I'm doing with coaching, like, it all really starts, I'm really seeing how this all comes together. And the tree model came up when I was working with a big tech client, and we were trying to explain why, or at least we were trying to very succinctly explain why we were going to go real deep in a conversation so that we can really make better communicators. Because on the outset you could say, oh, well, yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. But unless you can visualize exactly what's going on, it's hard to take that for face value. And so where the tree model was born out of is when I was explaining, I'm like, look, imagine a beautiful, thriving oak. Like all of us want to be thriving. So let's just imagine we're big oak trees. Like if you want to thrive, you want the whole oak tree to thrive. Now, when it comes to coaching, people think, okay, well, I want to thrive. Prune my leaves, make my leaves make my canopy look really pretty. And so people will come to coaching thinking that, okay, you're going to give me a list of to-dos and you're going to project manage my change. And I'm going to take on these new behaviors and practices and try to take on new habits. And I'm like, well, we could do that. And we can change these techniques in communication. And so that's where it was really came up. It was like all these communication techniques. I was like, well, we could do that, but that's effectively like pruning a canopy of an unhealthy tree, and it might look okay, but it's not going to serve you. And so what do we have to do? We have to water and fertilize the roots, right? And then we have to understand, like, where's the tree in relationship to others and the sunlight. And so that's where it was like, oh my gosh. And that's everything I also do. And this is how it happens in coaching. So the roots really represent the relationship we have with ourselves. And this is absolutely critical because we get that, but we don't usually understand why. But here's why it's critical, because that relationship with self forms the fundamental primary lens that we look out to the world, that gives color and meaning to everything we perceive. So in other words, the world out there is not objective. What we experience is a projection of the relationship we have with ourselves. And so if we want to thrive, if we want to have impact, if we want to succeed, that is one of the most fundamental and necessary things we need to do. So that's the roots. It's really watering the roots. And then, of course, the health of the tree in relationship to others. That's our relationships. Because why is this important? We don't create in a vacuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum. It's all happening in relationship to one another. So what's our ability to be conversationally intelligent, create trust, and to make magic happen with those that we interface with? And then you've got the canopy, and the canopy is all the skills and the techniques and the habit changes and all of the, the pruning that we might want to do in our life. So this is a choice at the level of action. So for example, if I want to be healthy, I'm going to choose an apple over a candy bar. Right. And so it's like, what are those effectual things that we can start to shift? And then all of it together is important, and we have to mind all three.
It's so brilliant. So I'm curious, are the blind spots that you usually find for people at the root system?
Are you saying, was the question, do you find them at the root system?
Yeah, are always these blind spots on essentially with the relationship we have with ourselves?
They actually exist on all levels, and they all have pretty interesting impacts. The ones at the root, right? So the relationship we have with ourselves, absolutely. Those blind spots, when we can uncover and transform those, that's going to create a pretty powerful ripple effect. And then the next level, the blind spots that we experience in relationships and in communication, that can also have some pretty powerful impacts as well. And so I would say blind spots are going to be found really at every level. But when we really want to create true transformation for ourselves, some of the biggest gains can be felt in identifying the stuff we don't know about what we're believing about ourselves, what we're interpreting about ourselves and the world around us, and at that level, that's where, big changes can happen.
Yeah. So what do you find is are there commonalities in doing the work that is required for this kind of, what are some of the sort of major themes around resistance?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when it comes to the relationship we have with ourselves, a pretty universal blind spot. And I think this is just because of how we are conditioned and how we are, I guess, conditioned to develop within our society. There's a big blind spot around the reality that all of us neurobiologically face around rejection. And so, rejection as an experience is so highly triggering for humans, and it literally registers as physical pain in the brain, which I find fascinating. When I learned that, I thought, oh my gosh, how are we not talking about this more? This is so interesting to me. But the wiring that humans have and what it means to really stay safe and to exist and to thrive, we're trying to stay socially safe and environmentally safe at the same time. And, that search for safety is constant for the human brain. And so it's not just safety environmentally, like people with knives and tigers. It's snide comments and just any social threats we're equally looking out for. And so when we don't fully understand the reality that each of us face and the implications and the impact that fear of rejection has on us, we actually end up acting out in ways that we don't intend. And so a big part of doing the work is really understanding our neurobiology as it relates to ourselves and the beliefs we have established as a result of this fear of rejection, and then how it unconsciously prompts us to interface and interact with others. So that's a big one. The other one, pretty universally experienced as a blind spot, is the false limiting beliefs that we hold about ourselves that we don't realize. And so a lot of us have fear. A lot of us have, if you've heard of imposter syndrome before, all of that.
About that next.
Like all of that really stems from holding on to a false limiting belief that you're terrified that is going to be revealed as true. And so sorry. And that's even after I put the post-it, hey, please go around. I'm in a podcast. My 14-year-old, anyone listening, my 14-year-old just stamps through the opposite. Yeah. So back to blind spots. That's really the identifying, doing the work to really identifying what we hold on in terms of how, like what we hold on to in terms of what we think or hope is not true about ourselves is a big, big realization. So that's a big one. I could talk about the ones in relationships too, because that's also pretty big in communication and relationships. There's some pretty universal blind spots that we hold as well.
Okay, definitely. Let's do that. Put pin in that.
Yeah.
I do want to ask another couple questions about imposter syndrome, because it's one of the things that I deal with clients. I think it's fairly universal on some level. And I wanted to ask, when you say, when we understand the neurobiology, do you mean like what are the tendencies that are no fault of our own? Or do you mean like some different understanding of neurotransmitters and what's going on in the brain?
No, it's really more the former that you just described. And so when I wrote my book, Living on Purpose, and it was largely to really dispel all of this, because what I had been working with clients for really truly over a decade, it was really working. And I'm like, my gosh, I've got to get this out for people beyond just those that I can work with. And so in my book, Living on Purpose, parts 2 and parts 3 are really dedicated to understanding exactly what we're talking about here with imposter syndrome and how is it that we're holding ourselves back, and the neuroscience, or at least the neurobiology that maps to why it is that many of us experience imposter syndrome, how it is that we have these fears that, by the way, we think we're the only ones. Like we're the only ones that think we're suffering with this, when in fact, like everyone is kind of having these fears at certain times. And then they think they're the only ones.
Society, I mean,
I know. Yeah. We're all silently suffering. And so part 2 really is essentially is written in order to understand like what is going on in the brain. How is it that we develop that has us all taking on some false belief that, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough. Oh, actually, I'm not as competent as the rest of the people on my team, or all of these false beliefs that we take on. How does that happen from a developmental and neurobiological standpoint? Because guess what? We all have that. And then why is it that we are desperate to keep that from being found out from others? Because that's essentially what imposter syndrome stems from. And then how, and the ways in which we show up to keep others from thinking or finding out that we're not good enough or not smart enough, are really the survival mechanisms that we develop because of all of this. And so parts 2 and 3 are really dedicated to helping dispel, or at least educate us on what's going on. And then how do we get out? How do we free ourselves from this pattern that many of us find ourselves prey to?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely think with, rejection, or essentially being outsed from the tribe, like that has deep monkey brain probably wiring. But the imposter syndrome, is it your opinion it's more of our education system and we're raised into it, or it's also like a survival wiring?
I think it's definitely more of a survival wiring, right? Because, if it's true that rejection literally hurts, which it is, and then, and our brain can't really differentiate between tiger jumping out of a bush and, being humiliated or being judged in a meeting, right? Our brain's trying to keep us safe. And so it's going to do what it can to keep us environmentally safe and socially safe. And so one of the ways in which, so my hypothesis is, and this is why I wrote the book, my hypothesis is that in the ways in which our brain tries to keep us safe is that it, in our earliest years, and by the way, it doesn't have to happen in our early years, it happens at any point in our life. But when we confront, and it's that first very significant experience of perceived rejection, right? Whether it's humiliation, judgment, exclusion, just overt rejection, that extreme feeling of discomfort, like you're not a part of the group, or you're not safe with the group, or you're not safe with that person of influence, or you're not accepted by that person of influence. In order to make sense of that experience, then we imprint a false limiting belief to make sense of it, right? So it's like, oh my gosh, this just happened. Oh, I got to make sure this never happens again. Okay, well, wait, got to make sense. Why did this happen? You must not be good enough, right? And so we take on a belief that's not true, but it's a belief that we take on nonetheless in order to make sense of that rejection. Because again, the brain's trying to keep you safe. So now, and it makes sense because the brain's like, okay, well, this, and psychology around this is, well, if I got to keep you safe, well, I got to know what to look out for. And so therefore now, if you know yourself is not good enough or not smart enough or not whatever, now I'm going to look for all the opportunities in which you can stay safe. So that means you're going to go do this and you're going to avoid that. And you're going to go do this and you're going to avoid do that. And so so we enter into this roller coaster where we're constantly like playing it safe and trying for the things that we think we can do okay. And all of that just feeds this persona of, oh gosh, there's this part of me that I just got to make sure that it can't get found out. And so that feeling of imposter syndrome is simply a very real effect of all of this that lives within many, 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 many of us. And I actually think it's all of us. And we do a really good job of surviving this reality.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift now into relationships and some common blind spots there. Because when you say that, I'm guessing you mean like, in the workspace as much as, romantic relationships, parenting, all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the biggest one that comes up in every instance, whether it's home or work, one of the biggest blind spots we can have is the blind spot of not really being aware of the impact we're having on others. And definitely when we're not ensuring that our impact is congruent with the intention we hold, and so all of us, and I'm pretty certain about this, all of us show up with a good intention. All of us are the heroes of our own story, and all of us essentially want to do good and be good. I don't think anybody wakes up going, oh, I really want to screw over Megan today. Like nobody does that, right? We wake up with a really good intention, and then we go forth. And then we choose words, and more so it's our tone and our body language that is felt by another. And oftentimes we'll go forth and the way in which something lands isn't congruent with the intention we hold. And when we're not aware of that intention impact congruency, and we don't check with others to make sure that we're aware of that, and we actually don't work to make sure that the impact is matches, that's when we break trust. And when we break trust, we can't get much done. So that's probably, this topic comes up so much, Megan, in coaching and executive coaching and communication coaching and conversational intelligence coaching. It's tremendous. It is a big, 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 big it seems like low hanging fruit. And at the same time, it's like, it's so pervasive, just how much we don't recognize how we land on others.
Yeah, well, kind of like a hyper scenario there that I always find so interesting, is when somebody passes away, and like all the ways people react and things people say. And obviously the people that are closest to that individual are very sensitive to everything being said or not said. And most people are just reacting from their own position. They're not really thinking of like, what does this individual need most from me at this moment?
Perfect. That's exactly right. Perfect way to put it. Yeah, really good.
So tell us a little bit more about your backstory and what got you on this very unique web of multidiscipline path that you're on at the moment.
Yeah. So gosh, as a kid, I loved the really big questions about life. And I remember when I was really young, my mom and my grandma, I lived for visiting my grandma up. And they had a ranch up in, it used to be Mount Shasta, and then it was Tule Lake, California. And I would get so excited when we'd go visit, because my mom and my grandma and we would all sit around the table, and my mom and my grandma would have these big, beautiful conversations about consciousness and about just causality and just the nature of consciousness, very metaphysical. And I just loved it. I lived for it. And, so at a very early age, just craved that stuff. And I remember, starting to meditate early. I found Thich Nhat Hanh in 5th grade and read one of his books and fell in love with it. And Wayne Dyer in 7th grade, and went to a Deepak Chopra meditation retreat in high school. And so I was just very, very hungry for that stuff. And then at the same time, I loved math. All I wanted to do was math, and all I wanted to do was play piano. So both a mathematician and a musician at the same time. And it was just, my love of that led me to want to teach it. So in high school, I had a tutoring business. So I was constantly teaching kids math. And then I taught piano. So I rented a piano studio from my piano teacher in Sacramento. And I had a really thriving business in high school. So I'm teaching all these young children how to how to play piano and on math. And as I was mentioning earlier, I caught pretty early on my junior and senior year. I was like, you know what I'm really enthralled by? It's really listening for the stuff that they don't know that they don't know, because that's where they're getting stuck. And I started to pick up on that. And as a result, I was able to really alter my logic or my words so that I could help them discover what it was that they didn't know, so that they could actually learn. And so I picked up on that really early. And so then through college, I was doing the same. And this time I was very mindful of the fact that I was like, wow, I'm like, what is it that you don't know here? And so was very effective in teaching math at Cal, and then went off to, then I graduated, I work at Sun Microsystems. So I ended up in tech. And so I was there for almost 10 years. And for that time, I would always end up in these roles where I was the go-between between development and end user, and just always in this translating mode. And again, it was capitalizing on this gift and this passion I had for really tapping into other people's worlds and perception to close gaps and build bridges. And it was after my first child was born, who you walked right behind me here, Megan, in my office, who's now 14. And just the love of my life. Both my children are I love them so much. They are so wonderful. But after Aiden was born, I had a total breakdown. And it was a, kind of a dark night of the soul sort of experience. And it's where I realized, oh my gosh, I have no idea who I am, because I can't go back to work, because that's meaningless to me. But that was so jarring, because it was everything to me. And as a mom now, I didn't know who I was. And so in this massive breakdown became a breakthrough, and everything changed truly after a massive epiphany. And that's actually what precipitated the principles in the book that that is now out and available. But after that big breakthrough, everything changed in a moment. And I committed from that point forward, you know what, from here on out, I'm only going to operate off inspiration, and I'm just going to follow what feels right instead of what sounds good. And it was so hard, Megan, because like, oh, here I'm this very logically, very academically, rigorously trained mathematician that it's like, everything has to make sense. Everything has to be logical. And now all of a sudden I want to go to the science and non-duality conference. And I'm like looking at transpersonal psychology. And my husband's like, what are you going to do with all of this? I'm like, I don't know, but it feels and it sounds amazing. And like, I just know I have to study it. And thank goodness for my amazing husband, who's just like, okay, if that's what you think you need to do, go ahead. And I set off, and very quickly, boom, it was coaching found me. And then it just took off like wildfire.
So you work with a lot of leaders, which probably means a lot of egos. I'm curious, do you have some tips or some specific methodology? Because I'm sure not everyone wants to be told that they don't know something and that they need to know something in order to get to where they want to go. I'm guessing you might have some delicate techniques.
I feel really fortunate because I get to work with some amazing companies, and all of the leaders that really want to do this work want to do it. And so that requires a fair amount of curiosity. And that's really that's the minimum, or actually I'd say, like, when it comes to like, hey, let's work together. Hey, let's do some work together as a team or as a department. There has to be some level of responsibility that they're willing to take for the quality of their own experience and the impact that they're having. And so fortunately, I haven't had anyone that was so intransigent that was like, what can you tell me that I don't already know? Where it's, that it's somewhat of a stalemate. However, I do have a funny story though. So there was a period in not long ago, what year was it? 2017, maybe. I started doing negotiation training for a firm in addition to doing public speaking coaching, outside of my practice. And this firm sent me to go train all of the it was all of the heads of construction that manage all the contractors for all of the schools that are built in New York State. So you can only imagine. So I walk in and it's like this room full, and I'm not kidding, it was this room full of, I say this with so much love, old dudes that were like probably in their 50s, mostly white. And they were sitting back, arms crossed, and they're just like giving me the stink eye. And here this chipper blonde comes popping in like, we're going to learn advanced negotiation. And they're just looking at me like, what could you possibly know more than we know? Because they've been doing what they're doing for decades, working with slimy contractors, trying to get schools. And, honestly, so I'll tell you what the trick is. In order to, and it's not a strategy, it generally comes from my heart, in order to truly meet them and make for an amazing experience, I just see them all as dear friends. I just don't know well yet. And they just don't know me yet. And they are dear friends with amazing histories, with tragedies and traumas, and they have desires and they have fears, and they're all humans. They're all trying to do the best they can. And guess what? I do know a ton, I was going to cuss, a ton about the neuroscience of trust, and it's going to serve them tremendously when it comes to better negotiation. So I'm certain I know that, and they don't, but they're going to get super excited when they do find that out. And so I'm just going to have fun with them, because these are just dear friends that I just don't know them. We just don't know each other well yet. And exactly with that mindset, it's amazing how when you come in as a friend and you genuinely don't let their impact take away your deepest intention. Again, because of everybody's neurobiology, they just want to be seen. They just want to be felt. They just want to be safe. They just want to belong. On a neurobiological level, it just takes one other person to give them that, to melt away their defenses. And so pretty quickly, the entire the entire tone and mood was completely transformed. And we ended up having a pretty phenomenal day. So
I bet. I love that reframe of my question. So let's talk about trust. You already mentioned, what can you tell us about trust when we're maybe in a situation where we're not sure we trust someone?
Well, it's valid. And so taking a step back, trust is one of those things I think a lot of us just take for granted. And a lot of us think it's an emotion, or we think it's just this thing that happens if we like each other, or we have this history, or we happen to get along. And so there's trust. But the way I frame it is, trust really is the ultimate currency. And we are creating and eroding trust in our micro moments in our communication. And trust, though, isn't really an emotion. It's a neurological state in which we are optimized for our greatest thinking, for our risk taking, for empathy, for imagination, for creativity, for taking disparate ideas, bringing it together, and innovation. And so, trust really is this neurochemical state in which we are thriving, right? Because essentially trust is safety to the brain. Because if rejection is death, then what's life? Well, that sense of safety with one another. So if we've got that sense of safety, then we can be in a regulated state where our bodies can actually digest, where we can reproduce, where we can regenerate. So that feeling, that seeking of that sense of safety is really, really super important. And so when we're with one another, we're seeking that sense of safety, which is, can I trust that I'm safe with you, that my image, my status, my reputation, do I belong? Are we a part of a we? And then third, am I being seen? Am I being felt? Am I being appreciated and heard for the I that contributes to the we? So those three questions together really work to determine if we kind of trust someone or not. And so, I look at this really from a life force sort of perspective, where we really, if we want to thrive, if we want to have an amazing impact in the world, we need to be able to be in trust with those around us, or at least create and sustain trust with those around us. Now, does that mean that everybody's trustworthy? Maybe not. But, it's really understanding that it's important to put a spotlight on trust, and then do what you can to intentionally create it and sustain it. Because otherwise, if we don't, we just make life so much harder for ourselves. Because this, right? Would you buy anything of significance from someone you didn't trust? No. Would you share critical information from someone you didn't trust? No. And so it's very important. Yeah.
Can we go back? You said there's 3 questions. Can you repeat those 3 questions?
Yeah. So the first is, am I safe? Do I need to protect myself right now? Right. And so beyond like environmental protection, like, from the elements or from sharp knives, it's really the protection is my image, my status, my reputation. So am I safe right now with you? The second is, do I belong? Am I a part of a we? Like, am I included? Am I a part of this tribe? The third is, am I being seen? Am I being appreciated? Am I being felt? Am I being acknowledged? Am I being valued? Right. And so when you have all those 3 together, the brain's like, woohoo, this is great. And so we get a surge of oxytocin that opens up the prefrontal cortex. And then, then we have access to great ideas, and we can take risks, and I see what's right instead of what's wrong. Yeah.
I love that. Well, I'm so looking forward to reading your book. It's on my list.
Oh, thank you.
So tell us a little bit more about the story of writing it. Has this been, like a labor of love for many years, or was this a COVID project?
I would say all of the above. I knew what this book needed to be in 2015. And it wasn't until I learned about the neuroscience of rejection that in 2016 that brought it all together. So I had all these things that made sense, but there was one piece that was missing but I didn't know it until I actually learned about that. And it was like, all of it just gelled. I was like, okay, this is it. ta-da, and it all makes sense. Everything I've been passionate about, everything that I've been interested in now totally makes sense. So that I knew exactly what it needed to be, but I also knew that it wasn't time to write it yet because I was still in process of all the client stories, all of the examples, the case studies, and the research. I was so immersed in it. And I knew in my heart that I would know when it was time to birth it and bring it to the world. And really my motivation was largely for many of my clients saying, Amy, do you have a book that really supplements kind of what we're doing here? And I'm like, no, it hasn't been written yet. So I'm like, I got to get to work and write this thing. But also too, just because it's been so transformative with all of my amazing clients that I just didn't want it limited to those that I could work with personally. I wanted to make it available to everyone who is ready for this conversation. And so in 2019, it's like, okay, it's time. I got what I need. I got it all. And right at the end of 2019, I'm getting it all like, okay, I'm making the decision. I'm going to do this. And I meet who's now a dear friend, Christine Carlson, who co-wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. She wrote my foreword in my book. She took me under her wing. She's like, girlfriend, let me help you I will be your book doula. Let's get this out in the world. And I'm like, okay. So I went up to her place in Mount Shasta in the first week of 2020, Mount Shasta with her and Deb and these and other amazing women and map out like, what's this book going to be? Immediately get to work. And then the world shuts down, like, which honestly was somewhat of just what a synchronistic gift because all my travel's canceled. I'm not doing any workshops. I'm not doing any, I'm doing coaching one-on-one, but that wasn't that. Anyway, I just gained so much time. We're not entertaining. Like, oh my gosh, my weekends are free now because we love to party. My husband and I, we entertain all the time. And I'm like, oh, now nobody's coming over. So yeah, the book was fully written by the end of 2020. Yeah.
Amazing. So what was your biggest lesson in writing it?
Oh my gosh. Got a couple, but I'll share the one that was probably the most powerful. It's funny how, so one of the teachings in the book is about how we focus and what it is and really claiming what it is that we stand for, in each moment to create a lens that's very powerful. And what I had recognized that as in the process of writing, I would fall into this stance where I was standing for proving myself to the skeptics. And I would find myself in these attitudes and it was this more energetic than anything where I'm writing, but I'm finding myself needing to protect myself and really needing to prove and to prove myself to the naysayers. And I can't tell you how many times in the writing process, I'd be like, stop, Amy, stop. Like, remember who your audience is. Like these are for your dear clients. These are for these are people that want to, like, what are you doing? And so I can't tell you how many times I would shift into that. Oh, I want to, protect myself from the skeptics. But again, that's the power of the neuroscience of rejection, right? So see how it all kind of ties together. Mm-hmm. So I had to really eat my own dog
Imposter
food.
Syndrome was
totally. Oh my God, Megan, I totally had to eat my own dog food. It was wild.
This has been lovely getting to know you better, and I'm so excited for you in this journey. I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger from here. What's your next project, or if you can talk about it?
Yeah, well, so I'm really thinking through like how, because I work primarily with companies at the moment, and so with teams and leaders and I have all these incredible individuals I really do want to be able to work with and for. And so I'm in the process of developing kind of like cohort-based, community-based, like coaching programs, or at least transformative programs that I can work with larger amounts of people at a time in a group, just so that there's that group support. So that's exciting. And then the other thing is I know what book number 2 absolutely is. And so, but I'm also in that place where I'm like, not quite ready to write it just yet. So I know that my inspiration will tell me when it's time, but I have a feeling come next year, it'll probably hit me. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. I just hope another
Well, this just came out this year,
that.
did it not?
Sorry, what?
This just came out this year. I mean, you're still like in the afterglow.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Enjoy it a bit longer.
Yeah, but well, also too, but it's like, but there's still so much more to the conversation. I'm like, gosh, but yes. So maybe not next year. We'll see. We'll see what my inspiration says. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for all of your wisdom and your time. And where would we send people? We'll have in the show notes the link to buy the book on Amazon. What's your website?
Yeah. So real quick about the book on Amazon. So I did my own audiobook. Woohoo. So
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. So meaning I narrated. So that's, so the audiobook's available. It's on Audible. I didn't produce it. Oh my goodness. No, but I got to narrate. So but there is that option. So you can find Living on Purpose, 5 Deliberate Choices to Realize Fulfillment and Joy on Amazon. And my website is Always on Purpose. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do have an Instagram account, but like I was telling you earlier, I don't really use it, but you can follow me if you like. I may or may not start using it. Just totally depends on my inspiration.
Well, beautiful. And I look forward to being in touch and following your journey.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here and listening in to Energetically You. If you want to support the show, you can share the episode with a friend, subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, possibly give us a 5-star review if you feel so inclined. And you can always follow me on social media. Tell me what you thought of the episode. You can find me on pretty much every platform at Megan Swan Wellness. Hope you have an amazing day.